Mega Man has long fought against Dr. Wily to protect the world, but today I've decided to answer a question that nobody has had. How would Mega Man fare against the demonic hordes controlled by Urizen in Devil May Cry? Thanks to a neat crossover giving Nero access to the Mega Buster, we can put that idea to the test. But first, let's make it even more authentic. This mod allows me to turn Nero into Mega Man himself, so welcome to the Mega Buster Only Challenge Run. Before we get into things, I of course want to remind you guys about subscribing. It helps the channel immensely, and I would greatly appreciate it if you do. Now let's get back to it. We're jumping into the prologue of the game on Dante Must Die, the hardest difficulty, and using nothing but the Mega Buster to fight our way through. I'll tell you right now, the damage isn't great. There are 3 types of shots this arm can perform. A normal blast that does 7.5 damage but is highly spammable. A half charge that passively builds while you aren't firing, which deals 60 damage across 3 hits. And finally, the breakage, a full charge that pierces anything in its path. On paper, it deals 400 damage, but the piercing ball does a number of weak hits on a target before it procs the big hit. And thanks to the speed that it travels, the enemy usually has to be quite large or get completely carried away with the blast for the damage to be worth losing the arm. That is to say, most of the time, it wasn't worth the price of admission. Alright, so it's lacking in the damage department, but it has something else going for it. Hit stun. It can keep a crowd at bay by staggering them with every hit, and since it fires so fast, you can just stand there and let the auto-targeting take care of the rest. Even against large enemies that usually take a while to stagger, this thing does it in record time. The first boss gave me a bit of a false positive because I could see its health bar going down pretty rapidly from my shots. Yeah, that's not gonna last. The way to maximize DPS with this breaker is by spamming regular shots rather than waiting for a half charge, so that's what I did for the basic encounters up to Goliath. Against the boss though, I couldn't rapid fire because my shots would just go in between his legs and miss completely. The half charge was fat enough to avoid falling prey to his secret spread technique, but that meant I had to wait about 3 seconds between each shot. A huge boon of the arm is that both the normal and half-charged shots can be done without locking you into any sort of animation, so I was able to constantly keep mobile while snapping shots at Goliath whenever I had an opening. Because of this, it was also pretty unlikely that my Buster would ever break on me. Basically, if you're ever smacked while doing something with your Devil Breaker, the arm shatters immediately. But because each Mega Buster shot came out in 0.2 seconds, the window for me getting hit while using it was extremely small. That being said, if at any point I were to lose all 8 Mega Busters, I'd likely have to restart the mission, or at least in the case of most bosses, restart the fight. And when boss fights take 15+ minutes like Goliath did, restarting is no small matter. Mission 3 introduced a demon called Lusakia, the bane of projectiles. This dude keeps up a magic barrier nigh constantly that prevents shots from reaching him. My only opening to damage him at all was when he would try and nuke me, removing his barrier to channel all of his energy into one big blast. So until he decided to do that again, my only option was to dodge his magic and survive. There was an explosive barrel in this room, but my shots couldn't hit it. They just went right over the top. When I bit the dust though, I had an idea. Sure, I couldn't hit the explosive, but the lizards in the room could. If I lured the Lusakia close enough and then goaded a riot to slap the barrel, my magic casting friend would surely perish in the blast. He didn't. But he was severely damaged, so I only had to survive for a short period of time before I could land the finishing blow. Artemis was another boss where I couldn't just spam basic shots because she was floating, and every shot I did in the air would drag me closer to the ground. The biggest threat here were her bits, tiny turrets she could send out from her chest to shoot additional projectiles at me. But if I timed a half charge as soon as they spawned, I could instantly eliminate them. Throughout the 30-minute fight, I used Devil Trigger to to heal myself up whenever I would take damage. Sometimes I would hold back though, because on DMD, enemies can enter a devil trigger of their own, which cuts the damage they take clean in half. Bosses will pretty much always DT around 25% HP, but they can enter it earlier under certain conditions. One such circumstance is Nero entering Devil Trigger for some reason. Because of that, I did refrain from healing with DT too much, but the few activations I did, in addition to Artemis falling to the ground several times, caused her to DT at about half health, effectively doubling her remaining HP. It was a blessing and a curse. Obviously, the battle would take longer, but now I also had free reign to taunt and Devil Trigger myself as much as I wanted, granting me the extra healing I needed for the long fight ahead. After Artemis took a shot to the heart, it was on to V's missions, and thanks to the co-op/divergence mod, we were able to continue to play as Mega Man. Most of V's bosses either have less health or take increased damage at certain points, so Nidhogg and Garyan Knight weren't much to write home about. Gilgamesh gave me some issues thanks to how the Mega Buster fires. See, it shoots in a straight line. You can't aim it up or down, so small changes in elevation or things low to the ground could cause my attacks to completely miss. That, in addition to the boss straight up hiding its weak point, led me to essentially have to wait for it to go full car mode so I could finish it off. In the final battle of Mission 7, I discovered some interesting tech that could potentially double or even triple the Mega Buster's damage. The only caveat is that it required multiple targets. As I said before, the half charge is quite big, and if you get two demons close enough to each other, you can have the shot hit them both. Sounds innocuous enough, but what actually happens as a result is pretty interesting. The projectile itself seems to be used as a hit detector, with the subsequent damaging bursts spawning on whatever target get tagged by the initial blast. So when it detects two targets being hit, they both create their own explosion, which is large enough that it can hit other enemies directly next to them. In essence, you're hitting two enemies with one shot, but since the blasts overlap, you're doing 2 times damage to two enemies with one shot. I call it a happy birthday. Pretty cool, huh? In the very next mission, the full charge of the Mega Buster finally saw some use against Urizen. The crystal that protects the lazy usurper grants 360 degrees of protection, even though in this particular fight, it's impossible for the player to get behind him. Thanks to that, the giant piercing shot from the Buster was able to do an absurd amount of damage to that protective barrier. Then I got to use the full charge some more in Mission 9 because this room had 2 Lusakias in it, and I was not dealing with that. Wait, what room? Oh yeah, me forgetting what room I'm talking about. The run's just... You know what? Drop the script. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. This run's a blur. Half the encounters were just sit there, spam the button, and then be like, oh man, my arm hurts. And then the other half was like, man, this thing's taking forever to die. I gotta lock in. And then I would lock in, and like 20 minutes later, the things would be dead. Anyway, against Cavalier Angelo, I discovered a pretty neat loop that was made possible specifically because the Mega Buster let me shoot and run around at the same time. After Cav summons lightning strikes when you're close to him, he'll try and do a melee swing at you. The specific swing he does varies depending on your position, so if you're far enough behind him, he'll do an animation that ends with him summoning more lightning. As long as I kept circling him and intermittently sent half charges his way, he stayed summoning lightning. Despite the full charge's effectiveness against Urizen's shield before, I erred on the side of caution this time and refrained from breaking my arms, using normal and half charges instead to deplete the crystalline creation's health. Once it shattered, Urizen couldn't cast magic, and dodging his martial melees was a matter of little consequence. Progressing in what typically is Nero's last mission before the finale, I was presented with 2 different paths, and I decided to take the one that didn't make me fight a Lusakia. Instead, I battled against some nobodies, and that's when something weird happened. This nobody completely ignored its own rules. Let me explain. The nobody is an enemy that changes what it does based on its equipped mask. You've got the default mask it starts with, the Mask of Courage, and the Mask of Cowardice. When he slaps on the Courage mask, he becomes your average roided out gym bro, turning red and flexing his muscles. In this form, he gets right in your face, swinging his arms around and attempting to grab you. In contrast, last, the Cowardice Mask turns him into an internet troll. He hides far away and throws out exploding eyeballs, which make it very likely for you to catch a stray, especially if you fall for their bait by interacting with them. I can't stress this next part enough. These two phases are mutually exclusive. A nobody cannot grab you while wearing Cowardice, and it cannot throw eyeballs while wearing Courage. But the latter is exactly what it did in this clip. That shouldn't happen, and I hope you guys understand how freaky it was to witness that. The happy birthday tech I mentioned earlier actually came in clutch against Malphus. See, the chicken and the woman are two separate entities, so with proper positioning, I could get my half charge to hit both of them, which was more damage than simply spamming. Since the Mega Buster is so potent it's staggering though, I had to be careful not to throw too many shots at the witch, because if she went unconscious while the future KFC secret recipe was walking around, he'd go all goop mode, and that was super dangerous. With proper planning and a bit of luck, I felled Malphus in a mere 10 minutes. These next 3 missions were rough, all for vastly different reasons. This one was battle after battle with no divinity statue to fill up on Mega Busters. So even though there were checkpoints, there were times where all my arms broke and I just had to restart at the beginning to refill them. And for some reason, the wannabe Sonic lizards were really good at breaking my arms. It didn't help that the opening fight contained a Lusakia, forcing me to break at least a couple of the busters in exchange for charge shots to get past his bullet shield. Thanks to these various factors, I wound up having to do a majority of the encounters with a single buster to my name. So naturally, I played as safely with it as I could, but it was still terrifying nonetheless. I breathed a sigh of relief as I reached Cerberus because I got a refill on my arms, and the Mutt isn't too scary when using ranged weaponry. Just running away from him and getting shots in when I could was enough to trivialize the battle. I call it walking the dog. And then there was Urizen 3. This final battle against the Garbage God has some quirks that made him 10 billion times more terrifying in this run. He naturally reduces damage he takes by 25%, and on top of that, he has a special 60% resistance to ranged damage in particular. Those two things, plus being on Dante Must Die, led to damage that looked like this. Half of the time, I wasn't even sure his health bar was moving. The worst part was that his first 2 phases weren't even deadly, but I had to slowly chip through them to get to the truly difficult part, Phase 3. He starts using magic that sweeps the entire arena, and boxing moves that come out fast and hit hard. The longer the fight went on, the more places the boss stepped, corrupting the ground, which he uses in his most lethal attack that impales you just before he lands his final blow. The key to winning this was devising a strategy that could avoid the spikes from the air, but land in time to dodge his massive uppercut. If I could do that, I could shoot him in what was the biggest damage opportunity he ever gave me. After many failed attempts, the successful fight took 30 minutes, with the last phase accounting for about half of that time. Moving on to Mission 18, I was presented with a new set of problems, these pets. Griffin could rapid-fire shots about as fast as I could, so he was a huge threat to potentially breaking my Mega Busters. Shadow was more aggressive though, so he often demanded my immediate attention. The one thing I had on my side was the Buster's insane ability to stagger. I could knock the pets into ball pretty fast, all the while stun-locking them to prevent any attacks coming my way. Obviously, I tried getting as much damage on Nightmare as possible while he was out, but a fair chunk of my damage definitely came from knocking the pets to low health and having Nightmare consume his own vitality to heal them. I also tactically stopped attacking him when he got close to 50% HP, and that's because I was once again using my knowledge of enemy Devil Trigger to sidestep an early boss DT. See, if I pushed him below that threshold, he would have gained a hefty portion of meter towards his Devil Trigger. Then he would have used the healing pool, and once I pushed him below 50% again, that Devil Trigger meter gain would proc once more. By keeping him higher when he used his heal, I avoided doubling up on that half HP threshold, and as a result, prevented the boss from powering up for quite some time. Eventually, I pushed him into ball and took out the pets one last time before dealing with the main core. Hey, you ever wondered how many Mega Buster shots it takes to get to the center of this healing crag? Well, I decided to answer that question that nobody has had. A 1, a 2, like 500 or something, I don't know, I kinda lost count around 250. I thought it would be nice to send off Nightmare with my last arm by using a fully charged shot to I used the famous Mega Man dropkick to put him out of his misery. Yeah. Vergil was the last to stand in Mega Man's way, and he wasn't going down without a fight. The bright side was that after Vergil finished an attack, I could get full damage on him without any worry. Unless he was standing closer to the middle of the arena where the elevation was a little bit lower. Then my bullets would just fly right over his head. The flip side is that the damage I was dealing still wasn't a lot, and he liked to enter Devil Trigger frequently, which saw him heal back most of the harm I would inflict on him. On top of that was the matter of his summoned swords. Whether they were revolving around me or him, they would straight up eat my shots. Normal shots were too small to get rid of the blades circling me, so I had to use half charges when I could, but that also meant I would miss damage windows on Vergil himself. Similarly, the swords revolving around him would often intercept my shots and allow Vergil to get away scot-free. Wait, who the hell is Scott? Anyway, once the doppelganger started coming out, matters got even worse. I had to send 4 half charges to take out the faker, and finding openings to get those shots off was easier than you might expect, but I still had to divert my attention to the doppelganger, which means I wasn't hitting Vergil. The reason things got really bad is that once Vergil enters this third and final phase, he starts blocking in the middle of your combo strings. You're meant to shatter his guard and continue with your punishment, but if you hit him with a projectile while he's blocking, he instantly ends your damage window and returns to his normal deflection stance. Basically, the damage I could do to him was cut in half. Adding that onto the fact that he was still regularly healing from Devil Trigger, and I had to put more focus on the doppelganger, meant that this last third of his health bar became a true war of attrition. I got so close time after time, but he would eventually either break my final arm or flat out end my life. The entire lead up to this part was also causing a troubling ripple effect. One stray summon sword in phase 1 or 2 could break a Mega Buster, which might have been the extra arm I needed to secure that victory later down the line. After spending hours fighting the Alpha and the Omega, the Blue Bomber came out on top. On this particular attempt, I took every opening I could get, even while he was in Devil Trigger, to sneak in half charges and keep his healing in check. I whittled his health down as much as I could without getting reckless, so I managed to hold on to 5 Mega Busters for this last stretch. I wanted to finish him with a full charge, and that's how I found out you can cancel Judgment Cut End with it, and then the next blast triggered the mission clear. Mission 20's version of Vergil was much easier. He summoned the doppelganger less often, took a knee after 3 knockbacks, and hardly healed from being in Devil Trigger. This weakened version of the Son of Sparta couldn't hold a candle to Mega Man, and that was it. So, can Mega Man beat Devil May Cry 5? Yeah, using nothing but the Mega Buster, you can totally take out every demon from the prologue through to Mission 20. Some of it was certainly harder than I expected, but generally the run wasn't too bad. That's all I've got for you today. I hope you had or find the chance to smile today, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Sayonara.